All right. Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Back on Stage Live. I'm your host, Ruben Avery, and in this live cast, we discuss all things music in the context of your career as a working musician or band leader. And this is intended to be an open forum where we bring together musicians and band leaders to share their experiences and expertise so that we all benefit from each other's collective knowledge and can do a better job of growing our live music businesses faster and more efficiently. Because let's be honest, none of us got into a live music career because we wanted to spend all day in front of our computers sending emails. So we're entertainers because we love entertaining. So let's build each other up, be a part of this revolution of new gig workers, taking our industry out of the dark ages and moving ourselves toward a brighter future where we all can perform way more, make a lot more money, and do a lot less boring admin work. So if you're already a member of the Back on Stage app community because you're using our software to manage your music project, welcome back. And if you're not using Back on Stage yet, welcome to you as well. I encourage you to head over to backonstageapp.com to check us out and try our 30-day free trial, as we'd love to see you growing your music business with our tools. I'll say that most bands that come our way shave at least 3 hours off of every gig in terms of their admin work, which of course increases their gig capacity and revenue. They're also saving thousands of dollars a year on software costs and are able to take on 5 to 10 times more gigs without breaking a sweat. So come on over and check out how you can stress less and gig more with Back on Stage. So like I said, this show is intended to be an open dialogue. So if you're joining us for the first time, please click on the join button underneath my face so that you can join the fan spotlight section below and so that I can invite you on stage to share your ideas if you're comfortable doing so. I should also mention that today is being recorded. So if you miss any part of it or would like to catch up on anything you've missed in the past, you're welcome to head over to our website at backonstageapp.com and click on the live button at the top to find all of our past session recordings there. Okay, cool. So jumping into today's theme here. So we actually have a very special guest coming to join us today named Michael Vangerov. He's a veteran sound technician with the Liquid Blue Band out of San Diego. And so today is part 4 of our Mastering Weddings series. So we're talking about all things sort of live sound production, and Michael is a guru with this stuff. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about him, and then I'll bring him on stage to answer questions and talk about all things sound related. So Michael is a renowned guitarist and technical director for the Liquid Blue Band. They're an internationally acclaimed cover band known for their dynamic performances and extensive global tours. He co-founded the band in San Diego back in 1996 and has been instrumental in shaping the band's sound and technical excellence. So with his expertise, the Liquid Blue Band has performed in over 100 countries, which is crazy, earning them the title of the world's most traveled band, which is actually a Guinness World Record. So that's pretty awesome. So his technical prowess extends beyond his guitar skills. He's also served as the head sound technician for the band. His dedication to the quality sound and performance has contributed to Liquid Blue's reputation as a top-tier entertainment act for high-end events. The band's impressive resume includes a Billboard Top 10 hit, multiple albums showcasing their versatility, and Vangerov's contributions to their success. So whether he's delivering an electrifying guitar solo or ensuring the perfect sound mix, his role in the Liquid Blue Band is pivotal, making every performance a memorable experience for audiences worldwide. Awesome. So I'm going to invite Mike up on stage with me here so that we can have some time to talk together. Hello, Michael.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good, Ruben. Can everybody hear me okay?
If we got a yes, you can post a yes in the chat if Mike's coming through,
Okay,
but
great.
I'm fine. Yes, we got a yes. A couple of yeses. All right, cool. I will say just before we get jumping in here, if anybody else would like to join our fan spotlight here and ask a question one-on-one, basically to do that, you have to hit that join button like I mentioned. If you're having trouble getting your video to show up, which is what you need to do in order to jump on stage, hit this little icon in the top right of your screen, and that will open up your audio and video preferences there. And from there, you just have to select your camera and select your microphone and hit save. And that should ensure that you're able to show up there. And then you're going to hit this join spotlight button, press yes, and you will show up next to everybody else in our fan spotlight down there. Awesome. Okay, so let's jump into it. I'll bring my face back up here. Awesome. So yeah, thanks again, Michael, for joining us for this. I've been really excited to get you on here and pick your brain, all things sound. I'm a bit of a sound nerd myself, and just always kind of love doing it for the band. So it's so cool to have another guy like me on here.
Cool.
But yeah, I thought I didn't send this to you in the show notes to get you ready or anything, but I thought it might be kind of fun to start with a story. If you have something that maybe a funny story you'd like to share with us, maybe something that happened to you on a gig that maybe wasn't so funny at the time, but you look back and
There
laugh
are
now.
so many stories. We could be here for days. Um, yeah, yeah, the one when we met the other day at the coffee shop. I've met Ruben before. Just recently, I happened to be in Vancouver, and was telling him some of the crazy things that have happened to us. Um, one of which was we flew into Cabo San Lucas to do a high-end wedding and also play at the club owned by Sammy Hagar, called Cabo Wabo. And when we went through customs, they realized that we were musicians and not tourists, so they held us up in the immigration for 2 days and said that we're going to deport you and fine you $10,000 and confiscate all your equipment. And we were going through everything we could possibly do to convince them, hey, this is not what it seems, and it's going to ruin our reputation, so forth and so on. And we got to a point where we ended up, the place was basically closed down at that point. We'd been there all day for 2 days, and we were showing them a video of, look, here's us with, President Carter and some things. And somebody happened to walk by, took a quick glance at the video, and said to the immigration people, hey, what are you doing? This is Liquid Blue. And they turned around and said, so? I said, we know these guys. These guys are famous. What are you doing? So in like a 3-minute period with a conversation between the immigration officials, they went from you're being deported, fine $10,000, you're not going to play your shows, to can we take a picture with you at our flag? And you couldn't have made it better for like a reality TV show. And then we invited the immigration folks down to the Sammy Hagar Club. They saw the show and they got drunk. And at the end of the night, they're like, hey, if you need anything, just let us know.
Wow.
Crazy
That is
things like that.
no kidding. That's such a great story. Yeah, hopefully it never happens to anybody, but yeah, that's one of the tricks of traveling. I guess you guys have been to, what is it, 110 countries now?
126.
126, man. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's I don't know if you've ever do you often get caught up in customs like that, or is it was that
Once in a while we get flagged. Mostly it's when you're going through X-ray and they want to take out every little thing uh, in my guitar case, including the picks, and examine them.
Hmm.
Or if you have any kind of guitar pedal or anything like that. But since most of the dates that we do, the fly date, all we bring is our instruments. Usually it goes very smoothly.
Oh,
It's
that's
not like
good.
you're bringing a whole PA system or something.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. That would be tougher, but
Yeah.
funny. Well, thanks for sharing that. Cool. Yeah. So I guess the next thing is here. So you started as a musician and then kind of transitioned into this tech role for the band. I'm curious how that came about and how you learned and honed your skills as a technician.
Well, I've always been interested in electronics and gadgets and sound in general. And so when I came into the band uh, with Scott Stevens, my good friend and co-founder of Liquid Blue, he invited me down to help start this band uh, 25 or more years ago. We were hiring sound out, but it just wasn't making a lot of financial sense. And Scott already had some equipment, so I said, I'll take this role on. And
Mm.
so I ended up learning the gear, transporting it, setting it up. And as time went on, we started to get a road crew together, so forth and so on. So I got kind of out of the hands-on side of things and mostly delegated and went into the managerial of the sound.
Okay. Yeah. So it's pretty organic then from you guys just kind of doing it yourselves and then you just kind of doing it more yourself and taking it from there, I guess.
Yeah, just by necessity is what it was. And you can't
Mm.
you can't really do sound well on stage. You have to be out in the audience. whether it
Yeah.
means being in a fixed position, at a front of house position, or as today's technology has given us with an iPad and being able to walk the entire room and mix from
Mm.
there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a handy invention for sure. I'm so happy for the the
Yeah.
iPad mixers. Yeah, I guess speaking of sort of band leaders, I guess then are do you think it's important for a band leader to have good live sound skills?
I think it's helpful. Most band leaders, by the time they're in the position they're in, have got a good set of ears, so they know how it should sound according to the quality of the music and also their own personal band and within that group how things should sound. Because a
Mm.
string quartet is going to be quite different than a rock band.
Yeah, for sure. What about anybody looking to sort of improve their skills in that sound realm? Is there anywhere you'd recommend they go to learn that or work on that?
I
Yeah, how
I
would you do
did it all organically when I first moved to San Diego and joined Scott, and we were working with the Liquid Blue project. I had a couple of mentors uh, in local sound companies, and I'd shadow them on gigs and learn what this does, what that does, how they fixed problems. And I spent a couple of years doing that. Had some just really kind people take me under
that?
their wing, and then I would apply whatever I learned at that gig to my next gig.
Mm,
You can also go. Another idea is to go to a community college. They've always got sound reinforcement classes or general live music classes. Any way you can learn. Now today with the YouTube, it's everything is out there. It's just a matter of doing it and then getting into a position where you can apply that.
yeah. Yeah, interesting. Okay, cool. So yeah, so you shadowed a couple people for a couple of years. How many gigs or how many hours do you think, if there's any, sort of like where did you find you were finally proficient enough to kind of do it on your own really comfortably or
Well,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I just jumped in, and so there wasn't really any tiptoeing in for me. It was just kind of here's the board, here's the band, let's make them sound good, and I would learn whatever I could from whoever and then try to apply it as our gigs. Some gigs, of course, sounded horrible. It's a learning process, but gradually I got better and better at what I did.
Okay, cool. Were you guys hiring yourselves out to other bands as well, or were you pretty much all just sound for Liquid Blue at that time?
No, just Liquid Blue. I stayed focused with Liquid Blue.
Nice. Okay. Awesome. Okay, we had a question from one of our back on stage community members who was asking sort of. So she runs a string ensemble, and mostly for weddings. So she was curious, sort of how to find a freelance tech. Like she owns some basic equipment herself. She mentioned it was the Bose L1 system, but in terms of finding other freelancers to come and kind of run your own gear for you, there were sort of a few parts to her question, but she was looking sort of how do I find a freelance sound tech if I'm not going to manage the sound myself? She currently owns that system, so she's curious about pricing that surrounds the various options. So I think there are kind of a few parts to this. One being, sort of the pricing around owning your own PA versus just hiring someone to run that. What sort of the cost of a freelancer would be to come in and run your rig, and then maybe pricing to do with someone bringing in their own rig and running it. And yeah, maybe we'll just start with the pricing part of it because I think then we get into qualified
Okay.
techs and find people there. But yeah, let's start with pricing, and if you've got any sort of ballpark figures as to what investments people might be needing to think about if they're looking to own a PA, I guess.
Got it. Let's start with the first part of the question, which is how do you find someone? You can run an ad in the local online search for jobs and things. So there's usually a live gigs kind of thing. Um, Also, you can go to a club, and if you like the way a band sounds, talk to the engineer and say, "Hey, I have this type of band, and these are the kind of hours I work." Exchange some information, and if it's a wedding and it's a string quartet, very likely they're going to be performing well before a club sound technician would go and mix the show at night.
Hmm.
And just network, just talk to people, because somebody always is going to know a sound person that they either love or they hate, and either way, you're going to go in a good direction.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. I think definitely talking to other bands and in this case string ensembles that are doing what you're doing and asking what who they're working with, because yeah, the good sound techs are out there doing the jobs, and you definitely want to get a good recommendation, I think, before you just call somebody off the internet and hope for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, would you would you consider sort of trialing them on a gig, or I guess I mean I think with the wedding gigs especially, there you feel a lot of pressure in that case to, you can't really screw up, right? If the tech shows up
Yeah.
hungover and whatever, that reflects badly on your company pretty quickly. But um, any recommendations on sort of how to start working with somebody or trial them out if you're maybe not in a position where you can find somebody through a referral and just know that they're going to be good?
Well, part of it is before you bring someone on, doing a good interview with them, find out their skill set, find out what they've worked before, find out what they enjoy, find out what they do in their off time. The
Mm,
guy or girl says, "Hey, yeah, I just love to go out and have 25 beers." Maybe that's not the person for you.
mm,
But get a feel for their skill level, and if you guys have rehearsals, maybe bring them to rehearsal, set the PA up, pay them something for their time, and get a feel for how they how they work.
mm. Yeah, that's a good one. I like the rehearsal idea for sure. Um,
Every band or every situation is completely different, though.
mhm.
So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, different levels of complexity with strings versus a full 18-piece big band or something like that. But
yeah,
yeah, interesting. Okay. What
and you
are
brought up a good point about the weddings. They have a lot of components, a lot of pieces, as far
mm,
as the scheduling and needing to play background music at a certain time, because not every band is going to know every song in the world, and the wedding party has almost always got their three favorite songs that they have to have. So either you
mm,
learn them or you have the sound person play them off some type of MP3 player. But that
right.
person's got to be real focused and dialed in during a wedding.
Definitely, yeah. Have you interviewed a lot of sound techs like when you're hiring people, or do you just kind of find them through the scene? Or I'm just curious if, like we were talking about, the questions you might want to ask someone in an interview. Um,
Well, kind of both. Um, I gather a bunch of names and then I call them and chat with them for a bit and find out what their skill level is, what they're expecting for pay.
mm,
Because, a good sound technician is going to be quite expensive, probably in the neighborhood of $600 a show.
right.
More if they have overtime involved too, if they're doing quote union rates. So it can be
Mm,
pretty pricey. But
mhm,
conversely, you can find people that are eager to learn, that have some sense about sound, and you can kind of work with them, try them out a little bit here and there. Maybe you have your regular sound engineer, and you can bring this person on as a someone that can kind of shadow that person. Then they learn your board, they learn your sound, and then eventually your main person says, "Hey, I got a flight date, I can't make it." You go to this person you've been training, and
mm.
let them take the reins.
Right. Yeah, yeah. We've been kind of doing that in my project too, just trying to train up some guys to run our rig the way we like it done and have some shadowers coming up. So yeah, I agree with that. That strategy is a good one, I think. Um, okay. Anything else you think you'd want to add on the sort of hiring front if people were yeah, looking to find a tech? Any other pertinent
Some
questions?
techs have their own gear, and some techs will bring just, for example, a little Pelican case, and they've got a set of mics, drum mics, and things like that, just handheld mics, um, some test equipment, things that would just, it's like their go-to kit. And another sound front of house people have got more. They've got their own powered PA, for example. So if needed, they could either supplement yours or just hire them to do the sound completely.
Mm,
each situation is different. You got to find what's going to work for your particular band configuration and budget.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point about the sound systems having their own. I would also add to that like cars, vehicles, and driver's licenses.
Oh yeah,
That's something that's
I
coming
ask
around.
everybody that I interview, uh, you know, are you fully insured with your auto? Um, driver's license copy of that current. Have you ever been arrested? Things like that. Just want to make
Hmm.
sure that I'm working with someone that seems stable and will be reliable.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's a bit of a wild card of an industry, I find, in terms of
Yes, definitely.
information. So yeah, all things you want to check for sure. Do you ever go
And
to
then
the point of asking for references and stuff too, or?
I do sometimes, but most of the time, at least from my experience, it's a small community, and
Hmm.
one person will know the other person and say, "Oh yeah, I've worked with so and so and so and so." That's how we find road crew a lot. One of our
Hmm.
members that are on road crew, because they're all independent contractors in our group, whether it be the front of house, the band members, the roadies, uh, they'll all work different gigs, and they'll say, "Hey, I found somebody that's more than just a plug and push kind of person. Plug and push being basically they just do the manual labor and they don't have a real high skill set." And so I'll bring those guys onto a gig, see how they interact with the rest of the road crew, how the band likes their vibe, how competent they are, and then I can work them into the rotation. And I try to give everybody on the crew a certain amount of gigs and
Hmm.
not leave anybody stranded too long, and
Awesome.
not favor anybody either.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I guess you want to kind of keep the guys working enough to keep their skill sets up and motivated to be with the band. But yeah, I guess you guys keep a pretty good tab on who's getting the gigs and how to sort of spread them around evenly, or do you have kind of a top call?
Well, that's where a program called Back on Stage comes into hand. That has been a godsend for me. I'm, if you look up unorganized in the dictionary, you'll probably see this same picture here. But Ruben, your program has just changed my world. It's so easy to keep track of who's on a gig, what are they paid, what are the particulars, so forth and so on. Uh, payment is automated. It's just the best of the best. It's really helped me quite a bit. I can't say enough about it. For anybody that's out there that is kind of thinking about getting onto this program, it'll save you time, it'll save you money, and it'll save you headaches.
Well, thanks, Michael. Appreciate the plug. Yeah, that's awesome.
It's the truth.
Happy to be of assistance. Um, Cool. All right. Well, I think that's some pretty good advice for people looking to find sound techs. So, if anybody has any other questions they would like to post in the chat there regarding sort of finding your own technicians, if there's anything we haven't answered yet, and you'd like to pick our brains on, go ahead and throw it in the chat there, and we'll see if we can't get you an answer. So let's slide on to sound systems themselves. So lots of questions in this realm. For those of you who weren't here last week, we did a whole deep dive into sort of PAs and monitors and lighting a little bit, and I made some recommendations as to stuff that I prefer using on gigs. But so kind of wanted to continue that today and yeah, pick your brain today, little Michael, on your preferences. But in terms of sound systems, I guess what size? And so we're on sort of this weddings theme, so we're talking kind of in crowds of 80 to 300 people ish, usually in hotel ballrooms, golf course clubhouses, similar sort of small scale venues. What size and type of sound system do you think is sort of appropriate for those situations? Have
Well,
you
if
got
you're
any?
going to go 100 to say 200 people, um, I like powered systems. They're simple. Everything's built in, not a inordinate amount of cables running back and forth.
Powered
I'm a,
systems. Okay. Any sort of brand names or
yeah, I like QSC. We've worked with them for quite a while. Their stuff is very smooth sounding, very reliable. Maybe an 18-inch sub, and then a pole and a 12-inch and a horn. will get you by a couple hundred people. It depends on how much you're putting into it too. If you're putting every single instrument into it, you're going to need a little more firepower. But if you've got a
Mm.
guitar amp on stage, a bass amp on stage, and you're mainly putting, say, kick, vocals, some horns, um keys, then you're not going to need quite as much. And also the size of the room has a lot to do with it. And there's
Mm.
so many variables, such as, are you required as the band to provide sound for the entire room while they're doing all the speeches and things, or is it just they want sound pumping on the dance floor, but they want people at the back of the room to be able to have their conversations? That's real
Mm.
important to consider. You don't want to
Yeah.
blow people out because they're there for their social time too.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really great point. I think, yeah, that's worth kind of pointing out because the consideration of are you playing to the dance floor, or are you playing to the whole room, I think is a really important one. And it's funny because we were doing, I was doing a corporate gig with my band last weekend, and initially the band started off, and it was what I would call like party volume. It was not ear splitting. I don't run my PAs like crazy loud, but this was an older crowd. They were probably you know late 50s, 60s, bunch of older contractors, and they, I think, were a little tired, and anyway, lots of things were playing into it, but they got up and basically all left the room in the first song. There were like 20 people left in this room of 300 people. And initially the event planner came up to me and was like, "Oh, can you turn it down? Everybody left because it's so loud." And I looked back and I was like, I don't think they left because it was loud. They left because the bar's outside. And no one's sitting in here when the drinks are out there. Um, and they ended up leaving pretty early on anyway. I think they were just out of energy. There was a big conference, but um, that's one other sort of distinction. I think we're going to start maybe suggesting this to our clients who are booking is like, if you want a party, make sure your bar is in the same room as the band as well. So other things to note is like, you want to, yeah, are we playing to the dance floor? Or are we playing to the room? But if you really want it to be a party, consider putting that bar or leaving that bar in the room. And then that's another sort of consideration for the band, I find, because when the bar is in the room, now the bartenders are having to compete with the band's volume. So then you want to kind of think about where that bar is positioned. If it's too close to the stage, no one's going to have a good time because the bartenders are going to go deaf. But if it's at the back of the room, then you still kind of keep the crowd in the room and the energy's still sort of there. And if you're just playing to the dance floor at that point, then I think that's kind of in my opinion, sort of the best case scenario when you're like, you've got the PA for the dance floor, but the party's never going to leave the room. Um, and yeah, you don't have to crank it to fill the whole room. But anyway, just wanted to share that
And
little.
also, good point. Also, there are PAs now that the tops can be slanted forward, meaning down towards the floor, which will focus
Mm.
that energy on the dance floor versus out the back of the room.
Mm.
It's and just real brief touching on that. You talked about the placement of the bar. I always try to get a floor plan of the venue, the performance room. Want to find out if they have a lot of hard surfaces like mirrors and things that you're going to have to contend with, or glass walls you're going to have to contend with. Um, Want to find out the load in, if you have to take any stairs, if you have elevators, and if you have elevators, are the other vendors using those elevators? Because things like that are going to create big time delays. And by the time you finally get what you thought was going to be a half hour to move in, and you've got an hour and a half taken up by just getting the gear in the door, you're going to be running behind. So the more
Mm.
advancing you can do on the room itself, you'll be able to see what equipment to bring and how to place it. You'll be
Absolutely.
ahead of the game at that point.
Yeah, yeah, great tips. Yeah, I'd love to dig more into sort of how you advance the venue and stuff in a bit too. I want to come back to speakers for one sec because you mentioned sort of size of sub and horn and tweeters and whatnot. But um, in the QSC realm, I guess is the one you probably know the best. Do you have a specific speaker model you would recommend for?
We like there's the K181 subs. They've always improving their stuff. The K2 tops are nice. They got a 12-inch and a horn. Um, just about anything they make is high quality and sounds great and reliable too. That's important.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. The K2 tops are those aren't a line array system, are they?
No, that's not the line arrays. They do make line arrays if you want to bring more firepower, so to say, and be able to play a larger room. You can do that as well.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. I find the speakers I was recommending last weekend are sort of they're a bit of a line array configuration, but
Yeah, I saw those.
yeah, kind of my favorites for just kind of doing everything. Um, but yeah, so the QSC ones you're talking about, do those do the tilt down to the dance floor as well?
I believe they do. Yeah, I think they do. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, the the one of the advantages of the system that you have, the line array, is the bottom speakers generally face more towards the floor, and the top is going to reach over the heads and get farther back in the room. So that's a great way to steer the sound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, what I like about those Yorkville tops is they have two holes on the bottom of them. So depending which
Yep.
one you set the speaker into, it's either going to tilt it down or sort of keep it flat. So we typically just use one top on each side, and that's fine for most crowds. But if it is sort of at the end of a long ballroom and we do have to play for 400 people or something, then we can always bring that extra, go rent another top and put it on top, and then
Right.
we're well covered. But yeah, I like the sort of versatility of the line array systems in that respect because they're easy to just stack up, and most of the time we don't need it, so we'll own the system that we use most of the time, and then whenever we need to supplement, we can just go rent a little something and
Yeah.
easily fill it out.
That's a great way to do it because you may have one out of every 10 gigs where you need a larger system, and you don't want to be purchasing something and then have it sit for those other 9 gigs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's expensive just to have gear sitting, especially if you're gonna
Yeah.
pay for a storage unit to keep it in and
Oh
whatnot. So
yes.
yeah, do you guys have a big storage unit, or are you able to
No,
keep it
not
at?
not huge. I mean, it holds our van, which has most of the equipment in it, and then extra speakers, extra keyboards, some backline stuff as
Mm,
well. But we're
right,
not like a huge sound company that has stacks and stacks of boxes.
right. Cool.
Try to keep it
Um,
simple.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, how do you keep it simple? What are some tips you can share on sort of little things you can do to
Get
sort of tweak
get
your setup and
buy
pare
stuff
down?
that's a little stronger than you think you're ever going to use, and get less pieces. Don't buy a ton of speaker boxes and this, that, and the other.
Mm,
Keep things if you're doing weddings and you're transporting the stuff yourself, try to keep things compact. Don't get a huge, big, long mixing board unless you absolutely need it.
mm. Yeah,
All that stuff takes up room in the car or the van or the truck.
totally.
But
Yeah,
that
speaking.
being said, you want to have some expandability too. There's nothing
Hmm.
wrong with having more than 32 channels or 24 channels. With today's mixers, you can get more channels in a smaller format. There's just different layers. So the
Mm,
same faders, say you have 12 faders that you can see. If you go to the next level, it then controls faders 13 through 24.
yep.
So you get more capability within a small format.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know you mentioned one of your go-to consoles is the Midas M32, which does that. They've got their
Yeah.
layers and expandability and stuff. Um, yeah, what would you recommend for a band that may be just getting started, mixer wise, and do you go for the whole desk as opposed to just maybe a stage box where you plug everything in and then just run it off an iPad? Um,
Right. Yeah.
what's your
There's different ways to go. It really depends on what you are comfortable with or your front of house engineer is comfortable with. For our little local shows, we have a Behringer X32, and the reasons that we chose that at the time was that every club you go into had one. So we knew that whatever sound engineer we were going to hire would know how to get around on that desk.
Mm.
And the architecture internally is the same as a Midas M32. So for our flight aids and things like that, we request that. It's a good board. It's not maybe the best, but everyone knows it, and that really pays dividends.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good
QSC
consideration for.
makes, for example, a little small mixer that's probably, this big, and it's got 16 or 24 channels in it, and it's small. And once you learn how to get around on it, there you go.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we have my group's using a PreSonus 24R right now, which is a 24 channel. It's a 2U rack mount. We plug it into a router and just iPad control it. So
Yeah,
we
that's another great way to go.
yeah, we got
Personas
rid of
makes
the
good gear.
years, but yeah, for sure. And it's a lot less for people to fiddle with. I found with at a lot of the wedding gigs we're doing, if the mixer was sitting side stage, some drunk uncle would come up mid set and start pushing faders around. You'd have to
Oh
remember
yeah,
to lock it all the time. And
yeah,
so this, it's like nobody sees it. It's just hiding in this little rack. We could even close the front of it as we're performing and stuff. So it's like only the sound guy is walking around with the thing on his iPad and kind of
yeah.
lets him
That's the
disappear into
modern
the.
way to do things, definitely.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you guys have the full like for the Midas? Do you own the Midas then, or is that just when you
No,
guys
that's
switched it?
just spec'd on our rider because we know that everybody will have it.
Oh, okay, got it. So it's just the Behringer
It's like a
X32.
go-to kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I know those are popular in clubs where I am here too. It's just such an
Yeah.
affordable alternative to everything else. What have you found in terms of longevity with it? Has it held up over time, or
Yeah,
any issues
like
with it?
anything, you're going to need to do some maintenance on it. Once in a while, we had a fader that wasn't moving on its own correctly. Um, you want to keep up on your maintenance of your equipment, treat it well.
Mm,
Absolutely must have a flight case for it, or at least a good road case for it.
yeah.
You treat it well, it'll treat you well, generally speaking.
Mm-mm. Is that easy to repair where you are, or there's I've never actually repaired a Behringer thing before, but
Well, we're based in San Diego, so there's plenty of service centers or places that will repair
okay.
electronic equipment that you can take. But we've only had one problem in, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, nine
Mm-mm.
years.
Okay,
It's
well
been
that's
pretty
good to know.
reliable.
Yeah, 9 years. Have they been around that long? I feel like the Behringer X32 is still a new board, but time flies. So
Yeah,
the
yeah. They've got a new version called the Wing, which I haven't seen or tried yet. But
wing, interesting. Okay, I'll
and
check it
here's
out.
the bottom line: you could give me the best board in the world, and I'd make it sound eh. Whereas you
Mm,
give somebody else the board that I have, it's much better sound person than me, and it's going to sound phenomenal. It's the
yeah,
person behind the board. It's not the gear. Don't get completely hung up on I have to have this because my favorite engineer has it. It's
yeah,
all comes down to the person behind the board, how good their ears are, how much common sense they have, how attentive they are.
yeah, yeah. Totally, I couldn't agree more. It's yeah, it's a weird thing having to get someone else to go mix your band because it's you're putting so much faith in their ability to make
Yes,
you sound good,
they. Yep.
and you'll never know. You'll never really know how it sounds because you're going to be on stage behind the speakers.
Well,
And
we have the current guitar player in the band has a wireless. So a couple times out in the show, he'll go out in the audience and take a listen. And if something's not right, he'll walk over to the front of house person and say, "Hey, you need to change this, or I'd like you to change this, I'd like you to change that," so
mm,
forth and so on.
yeah, that's
So yeah,
good to do that.
they are
Yeah.
the sound person is when you get into the larger functions, larger crowd sizes, corporate events. Uh, a sound person. Some people will say that's the most important person in the band because they
Mm,
can make you sound phenomenal, and you know you're the hero to the client or they can make it sound like everybody's starting to walk out of the room. You're wondering why.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's I remember hearing one of my professors back in university and when I was studying jazz, just like the sound technician is a member of the band. So if you got
Oh,
a five-piece
absolutely.
band and a sound tech, he's really the sixth member of the band. Um, and yeah, you really like they should ideally be there for rehearsals, I think, and kind of get to know the intricacies of the tunes and when to boost for the keyboard solo and all this kind
Yep.
of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I always like to say, when people are hiring me to do their sound, and I'll often get feedback from the audience via the band leader or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, the audience said we sounded so great. Thank you so much. You made us sound so great." And I'm always like, "Well, you can't polish a turd. You guys have to sound good first, and then I can
Yeah.
make it sound good." But I always try to like, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you
It's like,
brought up a good point about the sound person knowing when to turn things up. If you get somebody that's no matter how good they are, if they've never mixed you, they're not going to know when the guitar player needs to be turned up for a solo or when they switch vocalists and that new vocalist is taken over. So there's that lag, there's that delay, and sometimes the solo, if it's only 4 bars, they'll come up the last bar and bring it up.
mhm.
Um, so what you can do is give them a set list if you're working with somebody new, so that they'll know. But the main point is that if you have a regular sound person, they're going to know your personnel, they're going to know your songs, they're going to know the flow, they're going to know what to look out for to adjust to make things seamless.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, that's super important. It's nothing more disheartening than being in the middle of your solo and being like, I don't think people are hearing me, or whatever. The drums are burying me still, and no one knows what's going
Yeah.
on. So, um, yeah, cool. I guess okay. Let's talk about pricing a little bit too. I think we kind of skimmed over that, but is there a price point in your head where, like, if you were getting started as I don't know, let's say a 5 or 10 piece band, you needed a front end, maybe some monitors, all your cables, carts, all that kind of stuff. Do you have kind of a number in mind of where people would need to be kind of thinking in terms of the amount of money they would need to invest to get
Oh,
started?
that's that's a tough one. And whatever I would randomly come up with, I would double it. Because by the time you get, like you mentioned, cables, by the time you get good quality cables for your system, that adds, X amount of dollars. All the little things that you don't think about initially, you just see a set of speakers and maybe a mixing board. Um, but all the other stuff adds up too.
Mm,
If you're in a 5 piece band and you've got amps and on stage, um, you don't need much more than the two subs and the two tops and monitors, unless you're going IEMs in your monitors.
mhm.
Um, I wouldn't even try to venture a guess. I'm sorry, I'm just not.
No, that's cool. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's a it's a bit of an oddball question for sure,
it's
but
a can of worms, is what it is. It's a Pandora's box because even
yeah.
between different speaker systems, they can have the same physical dimensions, but they can be 10 times more than the brand next to it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I will say I think we put together a second rig last year. So we've got one that we call the big rig, which is our line array tops and 15-inch subs. And then it's really just the front end that changes. And then we've got the EV50s for the front end on our smaller rig. So that would be something we'd use for like a crowd of maybe up to 80 people or something. And those are
Yeah, love
fantastic
that
for wedding
system.
ceremonies and things. But it was about $15,000, I think, for us to put together our smaller rig, which included a 24 channel mixer, that Personas one I mentioned, plus the two EV front ends, whole whack of cables. And we just bought the cables off of Amazon. Actually, they've got some Amazon Basics XLRs now,
Yeah,
which um, they're probably not going to stand up like most things, but or like the really high end ones, but they're so affordable. You get a 2-pack for $25 or something for 25 footers.
yeah,
So just to get you started, it's pretty simple. And then a couple of light fixtures, stands, microphones, mic stands, power cables.
That sounds about a
Yeah.
good ballpark range. I would agree with that definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I guess yeah, I think maybe up to like 25 grand if you're doing a bigger band and you need a whole lot of more microphones. Microphones can add up fast.
Uh, we
More
spent
cable.
about $30,000 last year on upgrading just our RF mics and our IEMs. We added some IEMs that we already had and changed out our mics and put everybody on ears and wireless units. And that cost us just that part was 30 grand.
Wow.
So things can get up there quickly.
And is
But
that
I'm not trying
experienced?
to scare people. I mean, you start small and you just work your way up. You find what you need, what works for you best, and then you say, okay, what would be the next thing that we can improve? And it's always a return on investment
Mm,
because you could get, for example, you could get the top of the line Shure Axiom mic, but if you're playing in a small ballroom and there's not a lot of RF frequency traffic where you have to really have the best of the best, then you're just blowing your money. You know, you
mm,
can get a less expensive model; it'll do exactly what you need. You got to make smart gear choices.
hmm. Are those? What did you guys get for? Are they all the same mics and all the same in ears?
We have Sennheiser G4 series in ears, and we run them mono. We don't run them stereo.
Mm,
And we got the G4 twins, so there's essentially you got two packs and a receiver. Again, keeping things compact if you don't need the stereo IEMs, um, and cost efficient. And then for our mics, we got the QLXD series receivers, and I think we got 6 or 8 vocal mic transmitters, and then some the same thing for the horns. We've got Shure mics for the horns, and we're real happy with the stuff. It takes time to set it up correctly. It takes time to sort through frequencies. Again, that's a double-edged sword because you got the freedom of movement. You've got people that can hear themselves clearly. You don't have to have the clutter or the feedback from the stage monitors, but you have to have somebody that knows wireless and can set the frequencies or learn how to use the frequency finder guides, things like that.
hmm. Oh, that's an interesting point. Yeah. So I've never actually used a frequency finder guide, but where do you get that and
Oh,
what?
Sure's got one. All the major manufacturers have got these, and they help you to dial in uh, what frequency is going to work in the city that you're in. It's a good starting point.
Hmm, interesting. Okay. So those wireless units you're talking about, they have a pretty good range, I assume, in terms of the different frequencies they can be dialed
Oh yeah,
into. And
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're
interesting.
not
Have
just
you
limited to
ever?
4 frequencies, for example.
Right. Yeah. Like the little cheap $200 units that give you
Yeah.
five options, and that's it. Yeah. Have you ever experienced with any of that gear you've got now where you just couldn't get it to work in a specific environment, or has it always come through?
There's been some dropouts, absolutely. If we're down near the naval shipyards in San Diego, um, you're gonna, or a convention center, or if we're in Vegas like we are tomorrow, um, you, the casinos and things like that are notorious for just tons and tons of RF transmissions, and so you got to be careful with that and just sort it out. If you get a dropout, then you shift the frequency, find something that's going to work.
Hmm, okay. So
Some
it's
of the
always
stuff I'm
been
talking about may not apply to all the musicians that are out there, and I realize that. You know, we started very simply: a couple of mics,
mhm.
a couple of monitor speakers.
Yeah.
Nothing extravagant
Yeah,
or
yeah.
complex.
No, I think
Keep it simple.
yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean the wireless frequency stuff is definitely an interesting conundrum because I've like with some of our wireless gear, we've got this Shure PGXD systems for the wireless vocal mics, and I would say 8 times out of 10 they're fine, and then we'll get that one situation where, and it's always in the most awkward scenario. Like recently, I was doing a wedding ceremony setup, and I set up the microphone in the mid-afternoon, and I always put a wired mic beside it just in case something goes really hairy.
That's
There's a
smart.
backup.
Very smart.
But I had two wireless mics set up and my wired one because I wanted to be really, really safe for this one. So I had the wireless mic set it up early in the afternoon, tested it, left the system running unmuted for half an hour to see if there were going to be any little pops or squeaks or anything. Nothing. Totally fine. A few hours later, room fills up with 80 people. We start the ceremony, and this thing just will not work. It's like doing these crazy loud pops through the system and squelching and just like
Yeah.
voice dropping
I'm
out. And
stepping on it.
there I am, like in the back of this room. Now I got to like run up to the front and pull out the wired mic for this person. And very embarrassing moments. So that kind of stuff drives me crazy. But it's like, I don't know what you can do to mitigate that, or if my solution of just having a wired mic on hand is really the only
That's the
option.
smartest. That's the smartest thing because you can't foresee what's going to change between sound check and the actual show. We've run into that more times than you can imagine.
Mm. Do you guys have a plan B ready to go all the time, or is it you just deal with
Um,
it?
we've gotten pretty good at just adapting the frequencies and finding something that'll work. A lot of the upper end units will have a frequency finder, so they will search within the spectrum where all the RF is happening, and they'll find a clear frequency.
Mm,
And
okay.
you just set it to that clear frequency, and usually you're good to go, but not always.
So it's kind of a whack-a-mole situation, and press the button and hope the machine makes the
Yeah.
best choice for you. Interesting. Cool. Where to go from here? In-ear monitors versus wedges. I guess that's a sort of a big one for people
Okay,
too.
that's that.
You have
I can sum up pretty quickly. Um, wedges. Uh, well, there's two main advantages to using in-ears, and one of them, the primary, is that the vocalist, if they've got them set right, can hear their pitch much better. They're not fighting the feedback from the wedge. They're not fighting trying to get it loud enough. Um, so their pitch is going to be better. They'll be able to hear everything better.
mm,
Uh, and the other side of that is if you're going with in-ears and you don't have these wedges on stage, if you get into a room that's tight and it's got glass walls all around, you're not going to have the same feedback issues as you would with wedges because it takes that right out of the mix, and it'll be easier for the engineer to mix as well because he's not having to scoop a bunch of frequencies out to get it not feedback. So
totally, totally.
there's some serious advantages for in-ears. Some
Mm,
people, conversely, are used to wedges or prefer wedges. They want to hear all the audience
mm,
interaction. And
yeah.
when you have in-ears, it takes some of that away. So
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you guys have anything? I've heard of some bands putting up like a room microphone or something, so they can kind of funnel a bit of that audience energy into their in
yeah, you
ears.
you can do that. Uh, I don't know if it's that needed, but some people do that. Yeah, we don't, but some people do.
Interesting. Okay. Um, what else I want to ask you about that? Yeah, I guess the whole taking the wedges off the stage and cleaning up the mix is really nice. I mean, I enjoy that as a front of house guy too when I'm not having to fight with monitor sounds. I find it really, really cleans up the low end, especially or the low mids,
Yeah,
because that backward speaker effect just isn't there anymore. But what about the amps that are on the stage? If you guys are all on in ears, is anybody still using an amp on stage? Is that necessary, you think? Or
we do, but it's just basically for a couple of different reasons. One is it gives the guitar player and the bass player, keyboard player in our group is just on ears, doesn't need an amp. But the bass player, it just generates that core sound on stage for the drummer and the bass player especially, and the guitar player can tip it up and hear himself. Guitar players always want to hear themselves more. It's just the way it is. Um, I know from experience. Um, but yeah, and it's a visual thing for sure, because not everybody is accustomed to looking at a stage, hearing this great sound, but saying, "Well, where's the amps? I just see them banging away on a guitar and a bass, but I don't see any amp there."
Hmm.
So it's a visual reinforcement, but you don't need it. You really
Yeah,
don't.
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I find one of the bands I tech for, I think one of the best times I've ever heard them, or the best they've ever sounded, was when the bass player forgot his amp, and or well, he brought the amp, but he forgot the cab. So it was like no speaker, but just the little dials, and uh, and it was fine. We just wired that into the system, and I just sent him through the front, and it was such a clean sound all night. And
Oh
their
yeah,
guitar player actually just uses one of those amp modelers, and he doesn't bring an amp anymore either.
yep,
So it was like
very popular.
everything except the drums, I had complete control over. It was just made for a really nice sound. So yeah, interesting to see how you guys are
And
doing
another thing
that.
about the amps on stage versus the modelers for both the bass and going direct or the guitar is that some musicians they put the amp, for example, on the floor so the back of their knees is getting blasted, but they
Mm,
can't hear it where their ears are. And so
yeah,
they turn it up. And then for the front of house engineer, it's like, I can't add anything to this. I can't, because I can't subtract the amps. They're just too
yeah,
loud on stage. So
totally.
another thing to consider with, without having amps on stage. But I think most bands like to have amps on stage,
Yeah,
except
yeah, I
when they're
feel that.
carrying them into the room.
Yeah,
That's another
definitely a
thing
pro.
about IEMs is the IEMs. You're not going to have. You'll bring a rack of IEMs in the receivers, and then you'll bring a box that contains the belt packs. But you
Mm,
don't have to bring in these huge wedges everywhere. It's just
yeah.
less to transport, less to set up.
Do you find they save you time? Like I know there's other complexities to in ears, like you say,
Oh
finding
yeah,
the
yeah.
frequencies and messing around.
Time,
But
no.
yeah,
Time, if anything, they're going to be at least equal to because you have to dial in the mix for each individual musician. If you have a core band who plays with you every week, if that's how often you guys are doing gigs, and you have, for example, a digital board that can recall presets. Once you go to a show and everybody says, "Man, that sound was great. I heard everything in the in-ears great." Save that preset. You bring it up the next time, and that's your. It's not your, ultimate, but it's your reference point where you can
mm,
start from. And if say the room acoustics are making things sound a little weird, you can adjust from there. But it'll save you time as far as that goes.
yeah, okay, yeah. That's that's interesting. My band's sort of in the process of possibly switching over to in ears, and obviously we do have the digital board, so we can recall and everything. But um, I've always thought like, oh, it's going to save so much time because we just roll in there and we plug in the in ears and then we're good to go, and we don't have to lug these wedges everywhere and wire them up two times because they got their speaker and their power and all that. But the more we've done it, I'm like, it's not taking me any less
Not
time
taking
to
it.
set up. So I'm just curious
When
how.
I advance a show, I since we have this same basic mixer that unless the venue is providing their own, total production company and they've got their own board and they're not going to work off our writer, I send them a show file, and the show file is something that they can plug into their board and load it in, and it has basically our inputs and outputs already done, uh, basic IEM levels all set as well.
Interesting.
It
Okay.
doesn't always happen. There, a lot of times we do fly dates and we show up and the boards are way more sophisticated than what we use, so they got to start from scratch, and it does
Right.
eat up a lot of time.
Yeah. No kidding. Yeah. Do you guys? Our mixer has like an iPad app as well, or an iPhone app, so we can send that out to all the musicians, and then they can dial their own in ears. Do you guys do
Yeah,
any of
that's
that?
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you get a reference mix going, and then let people tweak it as they want, as long as they're not spending the whole night punching things on their phone,
Yeah. That's the
then the
danger,
audience
right?
is like, "Are you with me?" Or
Yeah. Is he texting his mom or is he actually into that guitar solo?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Well, we got just we should probably wrap up pretty soon here, but I know we talked about sort of advancing a show. You had sort of a laundry list of documents and stuff you send out. I thought maybe we could sort of maybe conclude with that, just how you advance a show, either with a venue or a tech company or all of the above, and sort of what documents you would typically send and what those would include,
Okay.
as much as you're able
If
to
it's
share them.
a local show with our crew, then I'm going to send them the details of the venue, such as the ballroom name, all the details, and they will go in and try to get more information. We try to get a floor plan and just get a real good idea of how long the load in is going to be, if there's vendors using the elevators, as I mentioned before, making sure that the correct power is supplied according to our rider, and the staging is up and operational, and the power is good to go by the time we roll in. Some events, and this is going to apply to weddings as well, in some corporate environments or hotels rather, they'll have to turn the room. So they've got like a company's general session during the day, and then they say, okay, we're going to change this into the wedding ballroom. So all that stuff we want to know ahead of time so that we can be ready to go. Sometimes we'll stage equipment outside the hall if we have a short time, so that'll help things. Um, yeah, it's just a matter of doing the diligence so that when you get to the venue, you're not going to have delays that you could have prevented or foreseen and accommodated for. We always try to get there an hour earlier than we think, because there is always something that's not going to be as you think.
Mm,
If it's a
I
fly
agree.
date, um, I'm confirming the back line. I'm confirming what gear they're using. I'm confirming the layout of the ballroom, the loading times, the sound check time, the line check time. All that stuff is confirmed. I send the front of house engineer on that show a set of mixing notes so that they know how we like things mixed. I send them a set list with each individual song if we're doing a medley, and the lead singers on those songs. I send them the band members' positions and their names. So when the front of house engineer, who has never seen Liquid Blue before, comes up to the show at the sound check, line checks, they know our input list, they know our output list, they know all the different things pertaining to the band and their set list for the night. So they got a pretty clear roadmap of what to do. So
Mm,
they're not doing a lot of guessing, and that
right.
helps.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Kind of the dream scenario for a front of house guy. I know
Yeah,
some of the bands I've worked
and
with are just pulling teeth trying to get their stage plot, and then you get this little box on a sheet that's like drums, bass, guitar, and that's it. You're like,
yeah,
are you bringing amps? Are you bringing
we
DI?
our stage plots and riders have developed over the last 20 years immensely,
Mm,
and always looking for ways to improve it. So it seems like every year we make some kind of change to it that's going to improve it. And we get feedback from the engineers on these fly dates. It's like, what can we do different to improve things?
hmm.
We played in Toronto a couple weeks back, and we asked the engineers, what can we improve? And they said this, and this. So we've now incorporated that into our riders.
Hmm. What did they say? I'm
So
curious.
uh, they wanted, they thought the individual band member names would be helpful because they're trying to call them out at sound check.
Right,
And
right.
the big room, they're pretty far away. They're calling them out over the mic. What's your name?
Yeah.
So
That's good to know. Yeah, that's a good one because it's easier than
yeah, again,
vocalist
these are things
three.
that, yeah, these are things that may not apply to every group that's in this audience right now. But as you grow, you can take some of these little tidbits and incorporate them into what you do. And if it helps you, great. Always
Totally.
learn, always learning.
How far ahead of a show are you doing that advancing?
Um, I try to do it a couple of months ahead of time. Some of the stuff we can do, what kind of PA is going to be provided, the back line, that can all be arranged pretty much. The things that cannot um, are the timeline. A lot of that is not decided until 2 days, 3 days. 2 weeks before the event is happening.
Right.
So the earlier the
Yes.
better. The more stuff you can get done, the better, because you don't want to be scrambling at the end.
Totally, totally. And what timeline wise, how long is it taking you guys to do a full setup these days? I know you're a
Well,
pretty big
our
outfit.
for our local gigs where it's our crew, probably 2 to 3 hours to set up all the PA and all the gear, and then say an hour for line checks, and then a full hour full band rehearsal. A lot of times our band will come in and rehearse the tunes that they're going to do that night for the wedding that they don't normally play. So it's good
Mm-hmm.
for that. And it also gets the chance for the whole band to feel the room and get used to the sound.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So maybe so like 2 3 hours for just the sound setup, another for the band setup, a hour, and then an hour for sound check. So like four or
Yeah,
5 hours. Cool.
about that. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, good to know. Awesome. Okay. Well, yeah, I think we've come up on time here. So thank you so
Okay.
much for sharing all
Thank
this
you. Thank you
incredible
for having
knowledge.
me.
This will
Thank you for
live in
having
the
me.
archives forever and be valuable to everyone, I'm sure, um, until AI learns how to mix for us and none of us are needed anymore. But yeah, this has been super helpful. If there's anything else you'd like to add before you leave us, or um, any other final wisdom
It's
you'd like
it's
to
all a
impart?
learning process. I'm bringing up stuff that's current to me in my situation, where a lot of the almost half at least the dates we play are fly dates. So that's a different set of parameters and things versus a band that's when we do our local shows. So I probably maybe should have focused more on the local shows. So I'm sorry for that, but
No, no, it's all good. I mean, I think hopefully the bands these days will start doing more and more destination weddings and stuff too. It's seems
yeah,
like a pretty big and growing market. So even if it's just in the sort of wedding sphere, there's plenty of opportunity to travel. I think so. So
oh
it's
yeah,
all related. So yeah,
yeah.
um, but yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much again for
I should
joining us.
add that. Sorry, I should add that most of the shows that Liquid Blue does now are corporate events that have
Mm,
large audiences. But we still do weddings. We still do these high end weddings. So we're flying here, flying there to do the weddings,
yeah,
or locally in the San Diego, LA area.
yeah,
Um,
cool. Well, yeah. Where are
oh,
you guys? Do you guys do any public shows? If people want to check you guys out, where will they find you?
4th of July shows sometimes. Uh, those kind of not a lot of public events. It's more private events.
Okay, okay, cool.
So
So I guess not a ton of opportunity for them to come and see you guys. But do you guys are you hiring more musicians or techs, or if anybody's
oh yeah,
interested in playing?
we're always looking for really talented musicians. They've got to be at a pretty high level. Um, and techs, I'm always keeping my eye out for the next great roadie or sound person. It's important to have if you're at the level that we were at. It's important to have a stable of people you can call, because
Mm,
if these guys are good and they're independent contractors, they're going to be working. So it's
yeah,
whoever books the person first. So you want to have a go-to and then a go-to after that.
yeah, definitely. All about the subs. What about you personally? If people want to reach out to you for any reason, where's the best place to reach you?
Boy, question. Michael at fantasticsound.com.
Awesome. Okay. Well, if you're looking for a sound tech gig or a gig in one of the most traveled bands in the world, or the most traveled band in the world, I guess, send your
Yeah,
email
that's
over to
us.
Michael. And who knows, maybe you'll get lucky and get in there. If I lived in San Diego, I'd be practicing a lot more and trying to get in there myself, but I'm a little far away. So
Yeah, yeah.
one of these
We're
lifetimes
close
at some
today,
point.
but not usually.
Yeah. Well, thanks
Well,
again,
listen, I
Michael. This
want
has
to
been
thank you
really,
so much for
yeah,
having
yeah.
me
Like,
on today, and I've really enjoyed the time and speaking with you. And as I said, I hope that the other people in the audience have gleaned a couple of tidbits that'll help them.
I'm sure they will have. This has been super awesome. So, yep, this will live in the archives as long as YouTube lets it, and I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from this. So thanks again so much for sharing your time and expertise with us today, and have fun on the rest of your trip in Vancouver here.
Love it
And
here.
looking forward to seeing you on a stage again soon.
Cool. Awesome. Have a great one, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.